First, I want to thank you so much for having me here. The hospitality has been tremendous. Suzanne, Dylan, and Tiaja have done an amazing job setting up stuff. So let's give them a round of applause. They've done a great job. So my journey in academics started in a room just like this as an undergraduate at Texas Tech. We had David Zareski, who was at Northwestern, and he came to speak about how to go to grad school, what to do in graduate school, expectations. And it's in that session, just like this, where I started to learn about what do you want to do. My story for going to grad school is very simple. I was a debate coach. I was a debater in high school and college. I graduated, and I was like, what do I want to do? I have no idea. And I had a professor my senior year write on a paper, why don't you come to grad school? We'll pay you. And I'm like, great, it sounds like a job. So I did it. And then my second year of MA program, a professor said, why don't you go in for the PhD, a doc program? And I was like, great, what's it about? And so it's one of these things we hear about, but we don't really have a lot of ideas like how do you do it or what it's about or what are the expectations. So who are my grad students that are here? What grad students are here? And they're undergrads? Great. And so today we're going to talk about how as an undergrad or as an MA student you should be thinking about grad school if you are. And so I put together a little presentation. We're just going to talk and they'll have questions, all right? So first, I think the benefits of grad school are sort of obvious, but not so obvious in some ways. First, you have to look at professional and career goals. What do you want to do when you grow up? And I'll tell you the truth, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up either. I'm still thinking about stuff all the time, and I think that's a good thing. You'll find you want to do that as well. But a graduate degree in whatever field is a great way to help you start to figure that out. Just like me, I didn't know if I wanted to be a professor, if I wanted to go to grad school, until someone said, maybe you should think about it. And so that's sort of my plan today. And the notion is that your professional goals, when you look at the job market, it's tight, isn't it? It is hard to get jobs in this economy, especially if you just graduated. Probably work experience is not where other companies or employers want. And so grad school is a great way to help build more credentials, more identity professionally to help you. Second, grad school provides really good abilities at gaining knowledge and analytical skills. Today I'm going to talk a lot about research and why research is important, even if you don't want to go into the professoriate. Because companies want what communication majors offer. If you look at every list that Forbes puts out or Wall Street Journal, the top 10 skills we want our employees to have, every single one is related to what you do in your classes. Every single one. I often tell my students in my basic course that if you're a computer engineer, a university can teach you about that. What is the first thing, say you work at Microsoft, they're going to do when you get there? They're going to send you to some type of training about computer engineering, about computer science, about their particular program. What they're not going to be able to teach you are the things you learn in your communication classes. How to resolve conflict, how to work in small groups, how to speak publicly, how to have interpersonal relationships. And so you're in a really good position as communication majors to succeed. And grad school just further enhances that. It gives you the ability to start analytically looking at knowledge and to start generating some knowledge. Third is personal development. How many of you have thought, I think it would just be fun to go to grad school and see what it's about? Has anyone ever thought that? Yeah. That's what I was at. I was like, why not? I'll get a degree, we'll see what happens, all right? And so grad school does provide that important element. And fourth, and I think this is the single most important reason for grad school, relationships and networking. It was in this very room where I first met Sean Wall at Texas Tech. We went to Masters together. A lot of our cohort went on together. The same thing is like here at Missouri State. And so it's important to build these relationships. And for the grad students that are in the room, the relationships you build in your MA program will help you the rest of your life. Up here are just some examples of our grad students who are networks. They can rely on each other. They can ask each other questions. They build those relationships to help foster personal development and professional development. In the bottom corner, you'll see Sean, my spouse Autumn, who's a professor at Western Michigan, and myself in the weird glasses. And you see the guy wearing the hat with the yellow shirt? That's Scott Myers, the former president of Central States. One day in 1998, we're at the National Communication Association. Myself, Autumn, and Sean are walking down a sidewalk. And we see Scott Myers walking towards us. We've never met this guy. Autumn walks up to him, and excuse my language, and says, "You're Scott Myers. I hear you're a badass." And if you know Scott, he loved that. The fact that you know Scott, he loved us. And since that moment on that sidewalk in Chicago, he was my advisor, even though we didn't go to the same school. He's a co-author on our book, and we're really good friends with him. And it's these relationships we develop in grad school that last a lifetime, and they help you along the way. For me personally, these relationships have extended into other areas, sort of non-human entities. And so I'll just show this as a quick example. This is Herman. Herman is our robot in our survey experimental research lab at Western Michigan. We have an identical robot at the University of Kentucky named Maxwell. They're both on Facebook. If you want to friend them, find them. Herman, though, has to have a face. And so because of relationships, we created a face, and no one's ever seen this. So these are the first people that have ever seen this face outside of our students. Do you recognize that face for Herman? That's Sean Wall, your department chair. He didn't know he did this. We took a picture off Facebook. We ran it through our avatar programs. We built a digital face. Sean, Herman in this case, or Maxwell at the University of Kentucky, roams through the halls. So if you get tired of seeing Sean in your office, imagine if it was a robot that did that 3 hours a day. So literally every day I see Sean via Herman going around the halls, and I'm having to talk to it. My students are working with it, controlling it. Sean's doing the exact same thing, his avatar at the University of Kentucky. And so these relationships we build help foster both research, social skills, and just general fun and friendship and relationships. And so this leads to the notion of why would you want to pursue a Master of Arts? And there's a lot of literature written about what is an MA, what's the purpose of an MA? And it's convoluted and it's complex. And I boiled it down to one simple sentence, or not even a sentence, a phrase. Mastery of a specific field. Your undergrad, the purpose is to get a very broad base, both in the liberal arts and in your particular major, right? When you get to the master's program, you narrow that down a little bit. And the purpose, I think, of a master's is to master the specific information, the specific literature base in that field. Does that mean you know everything that happens in communication? No. But it does mean you have a more narrow, but it's still a broad base of knowledge. As opposed to the doctoral program, what grad students are thinking about going on for doc programs? I know a few. There was a few. I don't remember. I talked to a few last night, I thought.
They're not here right now.
Oh, they're not here? Okay. The doctoral program, the purpose of that is basically the generation of knowledge. You create ideas. You start to do that at the end of your MA program with a thesis or a capstone project, but the master's is a really good way to sort of get all of this intense study very quickly to learn about the field. And so the MA is important for how we understand communication in a very specific context. And so the differences from, say, a Bachelor of Arts, a Bachelor of Arts tells us what to know versus how to learn. In the bachelor program, you sort of learn what you should know, right? You read the journal articles, you read textbooks, you take tests, you write papers. In the MA program, you start to learn, how do I learn to know this stuff? And you start to get a glimpse of how do people who are writing research articles do that? And at the end of your program, whether it's a thesis project or a seminar paper, or whatever the system might be, you start to generate a little bit of knowledge. When you go on for the doc program, that's all you're doing, basically. 2, it's shorter. Most of programs are 2 years, but it's really focused study. You have more freedom to tailor your specific program. What's your area of emphasis in grad school?
Conflict and dispute resolution.
Conflict and dispute resolution. Could you study that exclusively in undergrad? No, right? So you get a broad base, but you narrow down and you really focus. And you also get closer faculty interaction. As an undergrad, I hear there's like 400 undergrads, I think, in the comm program here, right? Now, ignore the faculty, ignore the dean, ignore the chair. Is it hard to see faculty? Not really, but when you think about it, can you just walk in there anytime you want? No, right? They're busy doing the research papers, they're busy prepping. but they're still doing a really good job in the classroom, right? In the MA program, you're able to have more access. Access is what's key, because if you're able to access faculty, you're able to get more benefits. Sometimes at Western Michigan, if I need, we're an editor for the small journal, and we need an assistant, and I see a grad student walking by, I'll just yell at them, hey, come here, I need you to do something. Do you want a Vita line? And what do they say? Yes, right? It's that kind of access that the master's program affords you, because you're able to get that closer interaction. And so this leads to sort of expectations of what it's like to be in grad school. And this is the exact same slide I use with our students. At Western, we stress the 4 Ps. Our grad students need to be professional, present, prepared, and passionate. And if you ask any of our grad students, they can cite these off. What are the 4 Ps? And we make them recite them during orientation. Being professional. You have to represent yourself. You're representing your department, your university. But more importantly, you're representing your discipline. You're representing the discipline of communication and what the rest of the world thinks about it. And so it's important to always keep that in your mindset of being professional. Number 2, you have to be present. Just like you're here today, you have to show up. That is the biggest thing we tell our grad students. If we have a colloquium, a research presentation, if we have a visiting scholar, if we have a job candidate, you've got to be there. Those are the expectations. Why is that important? That's not a rhetorical question. Why is that important to be there? What do you think?
Me or him?
Whichever one of you.
I think it's important to be there so that you can gain all the information, not just from textbooks and stuff, but
Yeah.
you can hear personal stories and gain relationships with your professors almost.
Exactly. Your relationships increase even more if you show up to stuff, right? You're seeing people in a different position. You're not seeing them just in the classroom. You're seeing them at a luncheon. You're seeing Dr. Dillon, right? You're seeing all of these people. It's more ways of connection. And the most important thing I argue for a master's is making those connections. And by being present, you get the ability to have those connections, to build those relationships. 3, grad school is important to be prepared. Now, for the undergrads, let's be honest. How many times during the week do you sort of skip the reading sometimes? Now, I know you're all good students and you do the reading, right? Be honest though, right? In your MA program, that can't happen. The expectation for graduate students, you have to read everything that's assigned and then probably go read a bunch more, right? Because if you're not prepared, if you're not in the graduate seminars, have read the materials, you're not able to participate. You're not able to make those greater connections between the theory and literature bases and research studies and how they all interconnect together. And so it's being prepared and go above and beyond. How many classes do you take in grad program here? Is it 9 hours or 6 hours? 9, right? That's a lot of coursework, isn't it? As a grad student, you've got to be thinking beyond that. We tell our students, we only do 6 hours, so it's a little bit different. But we tell our students, make yourself another fake course. Figure out something that semester you want to learn about, that you need to write about, that you want to research about. And treat that as a real course. Make yourself a personal syllabus. And so it's being prepared in the classes and outside the classes, and those 2 things create a synergy to where you're able to better understand the material. And 4, be passionate. If you don't like grad school, it's not the place for you, right? I even tell this to undergrads. Some people just don't like it. They're much better somewhere else. Don't force yourself to sit somewhere you don't like. It's okay to move on, and it's okay to decide this isn't for you, right? And so the 4 Ps. We also say use your BA and or your BS, and I do mean the pun, right? In your Bachelor of Arts, you learned about APA or citation systems, right? Probably in your basic course. You probably learned a little bit about statistics and methods classes, right? When you get to the MA program, the expectation should be, and is often, that you remember that, right? You can always tell a grad student who didn't really sort of focus that much in undergrad if they're having to struggle with stuff like APA, right? The expectation is that you understand and you remember all the stuff you did in your bachelor's degree, because it's all important. And so always going back and trying to reframe that. Third, you have to be self-directed. I think the best thing I learned in an MA program, MA terminal program, much like yours at Texas Tech, was to be self-directed. If you have an idea as an MA student or an undergrad student, go talk to a faculty member and figure out how to conduct a study to test your idea, or how to examine your idea, or how to understand this construct. You have to go beyond just your coursework, right? If you do just your coursework, how many papers would you write in a semester? 3 maybe? Something like that? That's a lot of work. Push yourself, though. Be self-directed to figure out something else to add to that. Because it's important to expand and to keep learning. And last, and this is, we argue that our program is the most important. Research, research, research. Our dean says this constantly. Research is the coin of the realm. Now, I don't know if he likes playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons or something, or Legends, but that's his favorite phrase. It's the coin of the realm. And it truly is the coin of the realm. Research is the biggest component of a doc program, but now we're seeing amazing changes at the MA level where it's becoming the big focus too. And some of you might be thinking, I'm not going to be a professor, why would I ever have to do research, right? You have to do research all the time. Even if you're going to work in industry, we saw an alumni, I can't remember her name yesterday, speaking about they write white papers all the time. That's nothing more than a research study in a professional setting. So learning how to come up with an idea, test your idea using a solid method and a methodology, and figuring out how to implement your idea, understand the results, is extremely important in the workplace and also in the academy. And as undergrads, this is important too, because research gives you a marketable skill that you can then go to your employer and sell. I can conduct a study. I know how to do surveys. Hey, you want to figure out which web page looks better? Let's run a little experiment and see what our consumers like. You realize, for example, when you go to Amazon, they're constantly running studies on you if you're purchasing stuff. I could go look at one product on Amazon. You could go look at one product. The same product on Amazon, we might see a different web page based upon algorithms. But that is nothing more than a large study that's happening. And so as communication majors in the communication age, research is vitally important because it's how we decide what consumers want, what's best for healthcare practitioners, doctors, nurses, marketing. Yesterday they were talking about in construction and architecture. Figuring out what works and figuring out what makes those things implementable, how you can implement them into a system. And so, tips for success. This is something I do every start of the semester. We have our grad students write their own recommendation letter. We make them, give them an assignment, they have to go home the next day, bring back a recommendation letter that they wrote about themselves. What do they want their faculty to write about them? And so we treat this as a personal strategic plan. And we make them carry it with them and be accountable to what they wrote down. So if you want your faculty to write is very self-directed, is always on time, make sure you're following what you wrote down in your letter. And I think this is good advice for undergrads too. Write your personal letter, write your own recommendation letter that you want someone to, how you want them to think about you. And when you do that, it causes you to sort of focus on these ideas and figure out, should I go out late and hang out with my friends? Or should I study really hard for this test because I want my rec letter to say they do really well at test, right? And so you've got to be thinking about the perceptions of others because it's a perception game, right? It's the notion of how do people perceive you, and in turn, how does that perception go out, whether it's in the world of work or their academy or professoriate? And so it's the notion of what do I want people to think about me? And if you haven't thought about that, you have no idea what they're going to write down because you want to understand what they're going to say. Number 2, this is important, especially for MA students, I think undergrads too. You need to be reading stuff and writing every day. Find just time just to read. Find time just to write. Writing is a hard skill to learn, but it's one of these skills that anyone can do with practice, and you can only practice if you're doing it every day. Take the weekends off, but write all the time, right? Even as an MA student, maybe you're doing your paper, right? But you're going to have to write on the side something else. Those things, you'll find massive connections between the two. I started off my research career looking at student-teacher interaction, right? And that led to looking at Rate My Professor. Who's used Rate My Professor? Right? It's a great informative website. And so we created some experiments based on Rate My Professor, where we controlled the comments that students were writing, and in turn, how did students then perceive the instructor based upon those comments? The point of that is, I would have never developed this program with Autumn had we not been reading and writing outside of our normal areas. We just happened to start reading stuff about social media and computer-mediated word of mouth, which led to a whole series of articles on Rate My Professor. And so it's by reading outside of your area and writing about that that you come up with new ideas and you can come up with new ways of making patterns. Third, time management. This is really important, and I'll be honest, I suck at this. I'm awful. Figuring out what's truly important versus what's just seemingly urgent. Email, while it seems urgent at the time, can wait, right? If I have the choice between reading a new journal article or answering the 30 emails I just happened to get that hour, most of the time I try to choose to read. And I can get to the email later, right? Because sometimes we get bogged down in this stuff of, oh, someone emailed me right now and I need to get back to it. Or I've got this thing that seems seemingly important right now, but it really could just wait a little bit. And as an MA student, your goal should be to learn. And when you're doing that, you're able to sort of create camps, create different focus units. There's a time for email, there's a time for Facebook, which is all the time if we're honest, and there's a time for reading and writing. Fourth, sleep. Right, you laugh, right? But this is so true. How many grad students in here have stayed up all night writing papers? Be honest. And didn't you probably spend just as much time doing it at the last moment had been if you had started at the first and wrote a little bit every day? Right, I do this too. If I have a deadline, I literally will start a couple of days before. It's bad, bad, bad behavior, right? And it causes stress. It causes us to worry about it. When instead, if we're writing something every day, what seems like a 20-page paper that's going to take hours and hours and hours might literally be 20 minutes a day for a few weeks. There have been studies when people look on how long it takes to write a dissertation, and the basic rule of thumb these days is 6 weeks. If you did from time it starts to the time it ends, it's 6 weeks. But yet sometimes it takes years because of things like time management or lack of sleep. Fourth, and this is something I really sort of preach, gratitude. Think about where you're at right now. You're in a heated building at a university, surrounded by knowledge, eating taste of Italy, as Suzanne called it, thank you very much, right? These are hashtag first world problems we're talking about. But think about how special and lucky we are, right? We get to sit around in a room, in classes, and talk about ideas, whether it's pragmatism, John Dewey, whether it's conflict resolution, whether it's interpersonal. When there's people in the world worrying about, where do I get my water today? Is someone going to come try and kill me? Whereas we're very lucky in this sense, so we should be very thankful that we get the experience to just sit around in a class and talk about ideas. That's pretty magical when you think about it in sort of world development. And you have to get involved. That is extremely important. Being involved in everything your department does, being involved in the life of the discipline. And you're really lucky in Missouri. You have the STAM, Speech Theater Association of Missouri. It's a great organization. It's like a communication association at the state level. I love this picture. I think Dr. Dillon, right? And the caption's great. I'll just read it. STAM members discussing the latest workshop. And it looks like he's saying dogwood. So I assume that's a room or something. A room, right? But this is a great organization. They have undergraduate panels, I believe. Undergraduates are welcome. MA students are welcome. The Sooner Conference in Oklahoma, I think you're going to in the next few weeks, is a really great organization. Central States, Missouri State has 2 different groups presenting at Central States. NCA, National Communication Association. You have to figure out how to go to these conferences. And I hear all the time for our grad students, it's expensive to go. I know it is. I don't know how your program can fund grad students. We give like $50. It's almost insulting, I feel like, to use. Like, here's your $50. It'll buy a fourth of your room, right? But you've got, the mindset is you've got to think about, that's just an educational expense. You can learn so much by going to conferences because you'll meet more people, you'll hear new ideas, and you'll see the cutting edge research or teaching ideas. And so it's how you build those connections of getting involved and understanding. And so I'll leave you with this and we'll open up for questions. I like this little PhD comic. They have a great Facebook feed. It's how grad school is just like kindergarten. And I think most of these are true. First, all-day napping is acceptable. Sleep. Number two, there's constant adult supervision. So in other words, there's people you can ask, people you can seek out for help, people that you can pick their brain. Faculty love it. When you come by and say, I just want to talk about this theory with you. Most, like I know for me personally, I'll speak about myself. If a student comes by, because of our basic course, it's usually two issues. A problem that they're having, and it's a serious issue for them, or it's a complaint. But if a student comes by and wants to talk about an idea, we'll spend hours sometimes, and I'll get on the computer, find articles, and it'll just be this big conversation. And it happens in MA programs all the time. And so there's people around you that want you to succeed and will help you. You get cookies for lunch. Look around, I think you're getting cheesecake, so it's even better than cookies, right? So there's always free food. A lot of cutting and pasting. We'll ignore that one, you can figure that one out. There are no grades. Sort of true, right? I think the trends changed a little bit, but I think you'll find as you move into graduate programs, grades don't matter as much. What matters is the kind of work you produce. My basic assumption when I do grad seminars is everyone gets an A, and you're only not going to get an A if you don't do your work. Because if you're doing your work, we're going through a process, that's the expectation. So grades don't matter as much, right? It's the output you can produce. Now, I should put a little asterisk here. They do matter though, so don't slack off, right? And last, crying for your mommy is normal. That's still true of me today. My mom lives south of Tulsa. If I ever have a problem, I will call my mom, or text her really now, because I don't want to talk that long. But, oh, like, crappy day, Mom. Oh, I love you, son, right? That's true of grad students. Like, use your resources. You have people around you that want you to succeed. And so I think grad school is an amazing opportunity, and I really encourage you to look at it. The program here is excellent. Look at the programs that you want to be in and consider a master's program, because it's a way to personally enrich yourself, and at the same time, it helps you understand relationships and connections. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned. From back on that sidewalk in Chicago to sitting in a room just like this, hearing someone talk for like 20 minutes about the same type of stuff. It's important to understand those relationships will last a lifetime. Right? So.